What's that noise? Told you not to do that, mate. Yikes! Up here, above the scorpion! How'd you know about the booby trap, Johnny? One thing I've learned about treasure hunting is there's always a boulder someplace. I found the golden shield, and another clue to the golden dragon. We're going to Mount Everest. But how will we get there? Oh, shoot, I'm supposed to be doing a thing right now. Hold on, guys. There. Well, first off, hey, welcome back to the show. This is Basement Resident, a show where we look at and critique 3 short stories from Japan, usually in the film format. And today we're going to be finishing up our Tales of Terror, the movie. But first things first, I would like to apologize for the joke I was making in the last episode. It just had a lot of setup and it didn't pay off what I put into it, so I apologize for that. I even got a little sticky note to remind me never to do that again, along with how many minutes of that joke I could have cut out of it. I'm currently working on a time machine to go back in time and tell me probably to trim that down, but until that time machine is finished, let's just not make the same mistake again on this episode and just dive right in. Thank you. All right, let's get this started. Our next story on the list is called The Promise, and it's the high point of the movie, being, in my opinion, the most interesting story in the whole bunch as far as the movie goes, and the events and the characters sit right up there with Steve and his gang of cohorts. And it stars... hold up. He's on his way. This is Hayuki. He's going to be taking care of his uncle's place, who is unnamed, but this time it's not because they don't just bother to introduce him. This time it's actually plot relevant, so we'll just call him Hayuki's uncle. So Hayuki actually shows up to the uncle's apartment, and he's going to be watching his uncle's place for 10 days. So he gets the keys from his uncle, and he sends him on his way. But his uncle has one request while he's away, and that's that he always answers if he is called. Hayuki is confused at the request, but answering if you're called doesn't seem that hard. So he promises, his uncle leaves, and he has this entire place to himself. I gotta admit, this place is pretty nice. I mean, it's big, it's spacious, it's clean. We're told his uncle is an editor for a magazine, and that must pay pretty well because this is a nice place. It doesn't take Hayuki very long to find the alcohol in this place, and he starts gorging that stuff down. After all, that's 100,000 yen per bottle that he's drinking right there. Jeez. But he gets one more call from his uncle, telling him that how important it is, if he's called, that he answers. No exceptions. Hayuki presses for answers of why he has to answer when he's called, but his uncle's boarding his plane, and so he's got to hang up and take off. After deciding to finish the bottle of the expensive beverage, he decides to flush the evidence of his crimes against his uncle down the toilet. Genius. Only if I could get rid of my crimes that way. And it's here in the bathroom that he hears somebody call Kazunori, and he answers. Nothing happens after he answers, but he did. And with that, he goes on with the rest of his day, and everything is normal. Nothing out of the ordinary, no wisps going around, no weird voices or sounds, no ashtrays thrown at walls. Everything is normal. Until the next day, it calls again, and he answers. And it keeps going and progressing this way every day, randomly across the day. It will call his and he'll answer, and then nothing else happens. It doesn't seem to care if he's really invested in his answer when it calls. It doesn't care if he does it lazy or if he's really invested. It just calls and he answers. He even tried correcting it on what it was calling him one time, but it didn't seem to get the memo and continues to call him Kazunori. So on the last day before the uncle returns, he decides to invite one of his lady friends over. to clean his apartment. Yeah, I don't know what he's thinking. I could have cleaned up this mess. I mean, look at this. Look, you can clean that in like half hour. But after the cleanup party, they're thinking about having a good time. But on cue, the voice calls and he answers. And so it happened for that day, so it's not gonna bug anymore. So he can go on with his business. But then it calls again and again and again, to the point he is struck with so much fear, he sends his lady friend back out into the world where she could get murder stabbed by, I don't know, this guy. And even after he sends her away, it's still calling over and over and over and over until he answers again, and then everything's quiet. Now, of course, this whole experience bums out Hayuki, and he decides to wander back into the living room, but now there is a new mess. A trail of leaves that go all the way up to this really tall lady. And she is so tall, she can't even like stand up straight. That's how tall this lady is. And she's popping out of the middle of the living room like a tree. It's a tree woman. We've seen ceiling women, we've seen floor women, we've seen sitting men, but this is the first tree woman I've ever seen in a house. And his response is the most reasonable response that a normal person can have of this. He's not like Steve. Steve would just look at this, say it isn't real, and move on with his day. But no, this guy does the normal thing to do. So Hayuki just goes outside and sits down and waits for his uncle. I mean, that's what I would do after an experience like that. His uncle comes back, he hands off the keys, and they go their separate ways. And the funny thing about this whole scenario is Kazunari isn't his uncle's name either. So his uncle is staying in an apartment with a ghost and likes it. I don't know how that works out, but it does. There's some kind of relationship going there. I don't know if the ghost is like a ghost of somebody he knows, or if he moved into the apartment and the ghost was already there and they're just like pals. I suspect it's like an odd couples kind of situation. But obviously the ghost really doesn't know who they really are. Like, and it couldn't tell the difference between, you know, the uncle and Hayuki. So what's going on there? All in all, I think this is a really good story. It's very interesting. The visuals are all striking. Like, it's just a very good concept. The idea of a ghost that's hanging around in an apartment and just calling a name, and you just gotta answer. Somebody's gotta answer. Like, I don't think this guy, you know, he's not house sitting because somebody needs to take care of the place. It's because somebody has to answer when this ghost calls. So he's not babysitting the house, he's babysitting the ghost. Seriously though, if you need an excuse to watch this short story compilation, this is it. It's this story and Night Watchman and maybe Full Length Mirror, but that's it. And it makes me really sad because our next story is a real downer. How much of a downer? Well, let's give it a look. This one's called Haseo, and that's the name of the ghost. And this is Audrey. She's Haseo's mother. It's no surprise that Haseo, being a ghost, is of course dead. How'd he die? Well, Audrey's got a couple of ideas, like how his school friends were always bugging him for money, pushing him around, saying they needed more and more, because they had to buy that new Vespa, which is like a surprisingly powerful, tiny motorcycle, for those people who don't know. Or how about that nice girl he hung out with all the time? Yeah, you know, she said that Haseo and the boys always went over to the pond to go swimming. But you know, Audrey knows better than that. She always told Haseo that it was dangerous to go swimming in that pond, especially around this time of year. But you know what? She's thinking about visiting those school friends, and she'll show them too. She'll show them all that how dangerous this world can really be. Haseo says no. Audrey's confused about that. She knows what she has to do, but then she gets a phone call telling her to turn on the television, to change it to the channel to watch the news. Those boys got their Vespa, and they crashed it in the pond. They drowned. Audrey yells at Haseo, telling him she knew what she had to do. She had a plan. But that's the thing about vengeful spirits. You can't take revenge for them. So with nothing left in this world to keep her here, not even revenge, she goes upstairs and ends her own life. And that's it. That's the end of the story. I don't have much to say about it, except for the fact that if this one story all by itself was a full-length movie, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Like if we had an entire third act with Haseo, just to have him die, the schoolmate and his friend trying to find out what to do, panicking under suspicion of murder. Maybe they did murder him. The mother continuing to see the ghost of her child. The audience questioning whether is there actually a ghost or is it just a mother tortured by grief and madness. But in this short story version of it, the ghost is a ghost. It is confirmed to be a ghost right from the start. No mystery there. The intense drama of the interrogation by the mothers to the schoolmate and the girl, off screen. You don't see it. It's not a bad story. I honestly just don't like the way it's told. And with that, the movie ends and the credits start rolling. So now I'd like to take a moment to talk about Tales of Terror, the movie as a whole. At the end of the day, the movie is a compilation of 8 short Japanese horror stories, and the fact of the matter is there are 4 of these stories I like and 4 of these stories I don't. And I know having a 50-50 split as far as my opinion goes might not make it seem that the movie in of its entirety is worth pursuing, but I think the good outweighs the bad so much in this film, to the point of those short stories that I do like being masterclass short stories. And I like them so much. It is so worth having access to those 4 bad stories to get to those 4 good ones. And in addition to that, the 4 stories I didn't like, I think if they were actually taken and expanded upon and had more time with, I think that they could have been, well, portrayed better. At the end of the day, the stories that I didn't like in this movie weren't bad stories in them themselves. They were just presented in a shorter, compromised state. Even to the point, I would pick these same directors to do these stories again, only in a expanded way. The sad truth of this situation is most of these stories in the compilation are like 15 minutes long, 16 minutes long, and so the end result is there's just not enough time to tell like a good, compelling, suspenseful story without time, especially since I think these are tracking in mostly suspenseful cases. That time is spent well with what they have. For me, it just wasn't enough for some of those stories. That being said, the ones that do pull it off are even more impressive for being able to pull them off within that time period. So yeah, I'm gonna have to give Tales of Terror, the movie, a recommendation. I think, especially if you're starting out new, just getting into Asian horror, like, it's a pretty good place to start because it matches the quality of most of the content out there that I've seen. You know, of course you have things like Ringu and Sweet Home and like these big famous like pieces of horror fiction from there, but the thing is it has a lot more to offer than just the big famous ones. And I would like to continue exploring that in future videos. But as for right now, this is wrapping up the first season of this show, and I would just like to thank for everybody that hopped on this boat with me to explore these things, and I hope you're all looking forward to the second season of the show, where we'll continue to watch Tales of Terror, the show, along with some other shows as well. I know I am excited for that. So I'll see you all next season. Good night.